to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading. In discussions with the leaders of Israel and Egypt, I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. On Ukraine, I'm asking Congress to make sure we can continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America.
I am sorry, but whose smart investment is this for? It is not for the USA, the people of the USA. It is for those who are invested in these wars. I've shown videos before where greed, these people are all about greed and death. It's not about money. It's not about life. It's not about saving people. It's about them. It's all about their wealth, their gains, what they can gain out of these atrocities that they keep committing around the world. This is not the first, and I'm sure it won't be the last. Here what though? You guys need to wake up to this, to really what's happening right now in terms of could we be going to World War III? If that is the case, are you positioned? Are you in a safe place? Are you looking at what you can do to protect yourself? Is the question. I'm not going to worry about it so much because I don't think it's going to get to that stage. What I do know is, or what I feel, is that the financial system is broken and they take us to war before anything else. Maybe it'd be a little short war. Maybe it won't be as bad as what people think it will be. You know what I mean? You're hearing different reports of Armageddon. I'm not in that mindset. I'm in the mindset of transformation to a new digital world where digital assets are at the front of it all. Regardless whoever wins this war or however this all plans out, it is digital assets that are going to be the key to one, stopping wars, and two, having a level playing field for all, because what we've seen is hegemony, greed, and basically taking people's human rights away from them. People need to wake up.
What is the best path forward here for the United States, as well as for Israel and the rest of the world? It's worth thinking about that. The stakes are higher than many Americans understand. It's easy to imagine several other nations getting pulled into the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Those countries would include Russia, Iran, Turkey, China, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and possibly many more. Some of those countries might take our side, aligned with Israel, but most of them would not, and that would be a problem. The U.S. military is weaker than it's been in at least 50 years since the end of Vietnam. Exhausted by two pointless conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, internally divided by identity politics, mismanaged by buffoonish hacks at the Pentagon, our services are in obvious disarray. Check the enlistment numbers. Nobody wants to join. But it's worse than that. The government that funds our army is bankrupt. The man who leads it is senile. Now is not the time for a world war. We would lose. But our commander-in-chief has no idea. Watch this tape from Sunday as he smirks while bragging that America is so rich, there is no limit to our power. We can wage as many wars as we want.
The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense. We have the capacity to do this, and we have an obligation to. We are the essential nation, to paraphrase the former Secretary of State. And if we don't, who does?
the most powerful nation in the history of the world. You can imagine the Roman Senate issuing a statement just like that on the morning the Visigoths sacked their city. Pride goes before destruction. That has always been true. It always will be true. How do we keep our country from being destroyed? Vivek Ramaswamy has been thinking about that all week. He joins us on set now. Vivek, thanks so much for joining us. So what do you think the potential for disaster looks like here? And I should preface by saying nobody disputes Israel's interest in pursuing a conflict with Hamas, punishing those responsible, defending itself, of course.
Absolutely.
But from an American perspective, how could this go wrong?
So I think that one of the things we ought to do is remember the mistakes we have made in our own recent past, in the last 20 to 25 years. After 9/11, how did we end up in $6 trillion plus of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Thousands of American lives that we won't get back. Part of how we ended up there was in the era after 9/11. You remember it. The tolerance for debate was very limited. Shut up, sit down, do as you're told, go along with the plan. I am worried, Tucker, that's the beginning of the environment I'm seeing right now as it relates to the current conflicts.
We seem deep into that right now.
We do seem deep into that. It's in the modern West as we know it. I mean, even Bibi's former national security advisor was quoted in an article earlier today when he was asked the question of, well, what happens after Hamas? His exact words were, I don't give a damn. I used to think first, act later. I don't think that way in light of last weekend. And I understand, as I did in this country, the pain of what people have gone through. You respond with emotion. But the thing I worry about, Tucker, right now is what I see is the left-wing criticism of Israel's what looks like to be soon-to-be ground invasion of Gaza is about proportionality and about injustice and humanitarian aid. Even if you just put all that to one side, from a U.S. perspective, from an Israel perspective, how is this actually going to achieve a good result? And my concern right now, and as we're having this conversation, it appears imminent that Israel is going to mount a ground invasion into Gaza. I'm concerned that a ground invasion into Gaza without clearly defined objectives is going to be the start of another no-win war that is not good for Israel and not good for the United States. And so one of the things I've been thinking about just in recent days, you hear a lot of histrionics here, a lot of bloodthirsty neocons, in fact, far less reasonable than even many Israelis that are far more rational about this than some here in the United States, is how could this play out? Right? So if we just think about one reasonable scenario, let's just go step by step in terms of where we are. Israel mounts a ground invasion into Gaza, okay? It doesn't have a clearly defined goal, but they've mounted that ground invasion. That crosses a red line that Hezbollah has previously identified, saying that that's their red line for attacking Israel. And this might be exactly when Israel is mired in a ground conflict in Gaza, which I worry could be a trap. Networks, kilometers upon kilometers of tunnels, a lot of traps that they could walk into. That could be a moment that's perfectly appropriate, unfortunately, for Hezbollah to decide to go after Israel. Israel's been in a two-front war, both in the north and the south in Gaza. Now you're talking about real risk of, there's no way that you're really going to avoid some level of U.S. involvement there. Now look at what the Iranian-backed militias in other places like Iraq, like, the Badr group in Iraq. You talk about the Houthis in Yemen. What have they said? This is also going to be their red line for involvement. So now you have broader regional conflict. At a time when you have civilian casualties in Gaza that turns the rest of the world's back on Israel. By the way, even in the case of success, ending up with what fills the vacuum, Hamas 2.0, with a bunch of radicalized Palestinians. So I don't think I think that's unfortunately, a reasonable way for how this could play out.
Can I just ask you a sincere question? What is the plan? I mean, this is something the United States has preemptively endorsed and is paying for, so I think it's fair to ask that question. What is the plan?
Well, I think that's the elephant in the room that's missing, is that we don't have, from Israel, a clear sense of what the objectives are. Now, in the United States, we should be reasonably helping our partner who is struck in the case of really a devastating and inhumane hit to their country. It was barbaric. I think our job is to tell them these are the mistakes we made in the wake of 9/11 when that happened to us here. This is a time to have a clearly defined objective. Instead, we get histrionics from the likes of Lindsey Graham or Nikki Haley or Mike Pence offering histrionics at a time when you actually could use rational strategy.
It's amazing to get a moral lecture from people who've so diminished our country and who are responsible for the deaths of so many Americans.
That's right.
You from some high horse.
It's interesting. They cite their foreign policy experience, which I don't have, but they wear it as a badge of honor. I think that their foreign policy experience unfortunately shows in terms of the results that they have delivered for this country. My view is, look, a lot of neocons here are far more bloodthirsty than even some more realistic minds in Israel. What's a better alternative to the plan as it currently exists, which is a non-plan, an invasion of Gaza without a clear objective? And I think there's a real cascade of events following Hezbollah, following likely then U.S. involvement, following Iranian militias in Iraq to in Yemen to
and U.S. involvement would almost
have you in mind in Israel. What's a better alternative to the plan as it currently exists, which is a non-plan, an invasion of Gaza without a clear objective? And I think there's a real cascade of events following Hezbollah, following likely then U.S. involvement, following Iranian militias in Iraq to in Yemen to
and U.S. involvement would almost, especially if it's involvement in Lebanon or against Hezbollah, you can see how that can become a much larger conflict very, very fast.
Absolutely. And even think about Israel's ability to fight Hezbollah. The last time they were in a war with Hezbollah was 2006. It didn't go very well.
Was there?
You were?
Yes, in Beirut. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't? Okay. Well, you would know even better than I how well that one front war didn't go. Now imagine if they're mired in conflict to the south in Gaza at the same time. And by the way, some of those groups in Iraq, Iranian-backed militias, they have said that they would strike back, and U.S. involvement here, strike U.S. assets in the area in the case of U.S. involvement. Well, think about where we have our biggest embassy. Biggest embassy is in Baghdad, where, by the way, as when we're having this conversation, it's a little bit chaotic out of Baghdad. I don't think it's crazy for the U.S. embassy in Baghdad even to be evacuated. So against those
government's interest expense will increase more between 2022 and 2024 than in the 51 years. Interest expense will increase more between 2022 and 2024 than in the 51 years prior. And with about 30% of government debt that needs to be rolled over the next 12 months, this could become a big, big drag on the economy. Now, the second way it affects the economy is corporate borrowers. Corporate debt is similar to government debt in which it's not due at the same time, adding to this lag effect. Now, most companies, sort of like the government, they spread out their debt, so there's only a small amount that's actually maturing in the 1 year. So it can take time until the more expensive debt replaces the cheaper maturing debt.